Ron Purtee Show.
Hey everybody, welcome to the program. Today we have an amazing chat with Mark Russell, comic book writer in general. I hate putting people in that position where it's like they're just a comic book writer, or they're just a TV writer, or a movie writer. They're a writer. They put words on a page that tell a story that is moving and engaging and fantastic. And Fantastic Four Life Story is what he's working on now. The new issue will be out beginning of the month. I can't wait for it. Issue 6, final issue. And I love these life story books because they basically run the entire gamut of from when the characters came out to now, and they age and things happen to them like real people, and it's just fantastic. There's another one that Chip Zdarsky did with Spider-Man. I haven't read that one yet, but I'm very interested in seeing how that one works. But yeah, if you don't know, I'm a big comic book nerd. In fact, middle of next month, February of 2020, if you're listening to this into the future, a Kickstarter is going to be starting for a comic book that I co-wrote with Chuck Nasty and JB from Tales from the Podcast and 2G1C. Called Tales of Shock and Terror, and it's like an EC anthology thing. So we'll keep you up to date on that too. It's going to be fantastic. I wrote a third, and then JB wrote a third, and Chuck wrote a third, and then Drew Moreland's doing the art, and it's coming out through Cutthroat Comics, and I am very excited about that. And yeah, I'm just like ramped up about comic books. I know people listening want to hear my thoughts on something, but I'm waiting to hear back about something before I say anything. And if the conversation that I have with a few people warrants something one way, great. If not, coming out guns blazing. And we'll put out a whole new episode about that. I'll put out a special. But yeah, so this is a great chat with Mark Russell, and I hope you enjoy it. And if you've only seen the comic book movies, give comic books themselves a chance because they're amazing. They're just fucking amazing, and the stories they tell in the books are usually far better, than the ones in the movie, because the movie, CGI be damned, is restrained. The imagination knows no bounds in comic books. So, but we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, my interview with Mark Russell. Hey everybody, are you sick and tired of having to use your eyes on words to retain information? Then head over to audibletrial.com/I'm Uncle Ron and get a free 30-day trial for Audible. You can get so many amazing books to fill your ear holes instead of your eye holes and retain all that information. I prefer it when someone tells me a story. That's just me though. So head over to audibletrial.com/I'm Uncle Ron for a free 30-day trial today. This episode is also brought to you by Amazon Music. Head over to getamazonmusic.com/I'm Uncle Ron for a free, I think it's a 3-month trial. Let me fucking look because I'm stupid. I'm so dumb. For 30 days, okay. And I'm recording, kicking. This episode is also brought to you by Amazon Music. Head over to getamazonmusic.com/I'm Uncle Ron for a 30-day trial. For so many songs, your ears will be upset. Your ears will say something akin to, "Hey, please stop. I can no longer groove with you, sir or ma'am." So head over to getamazonmusic.com/I'm Uncle Ron and get a free 30 days that you can cancel at any time. And after that, it's only $7.99 a month. Only $7.99 a month. So get your ears bumping, make your booty shake, get at AmazonMusic.com patreon.com/I'm Uncle Ron. Yeah, but so I remember when I didn't pick up the book initially because you were writing it. No offense. I just get everything Fantastic Four. They're my go-to for Marvel. I don't read much of anything in Marvel except Fantastic Four. That's my go-to.
I was kind of hoping for the people who just read Fantastic Four, the people who just read Marvel, would pick up my story without knowing too much about me. And that you're exactly the kind of person that I wanted to sort of enjoy this book.
And it just so happened that as I'm looking at it, I'm like, wait a minute, I know that name. I know that name. That you. So let's get right into Fantastic Four life story. I mean, is it something that you pitched to Marvel? Did they reach out to you?
They reached out to me, which was astonishing to me. The editor, Will Moss, over there sort of pointed me out and said, this guy should do Fantastic Four life story, which was a godsend, because this is a project I just immediately sort of fell in love with doing. Because I think the Fantastic Four are my favorite Marvel characters, them and Howard the Duck.
Yeah, well, I don't know about Howard, but you and I are right there with the first family.
Yeah, so I was totally on board from the moment they approached me. But I wanted to do something a little different. I didn't want it to be like a greatest hits CD of all the things people have already read. I wanted to tell a new story using little head nods and references to older stories and plot lines, and create a new sort of unified story based on those.
Yeah, and I love the way that each issue is a decade of their existence.
I love the life story format where you tell a multi-generational story spanning time like that, which isn't too common in comics. You rarely see it done in such a condensed time frame, 6 issues within 180 pages, telling a story that spans 60 years.
Right, and then I love how on the cover of issue 6, if I looked at it correctly, Franklin has gray hair.
He's getting older. I don't. Yeah, he's I don't know if he's.
He might have old, young Reed.
Yeah, sort of graying.
Yeah,
he's
yeah. And I love that kind of thing, because you completely took away the whole aspect of how comic books are, where people are, Superman is 35 for 80 years.
Yeah. Franklin, who was a baby born at the end of the first one, it's in his 40s in this one.
And I love now, was it your idea? I'm not going to spoil anything for anybody who I'm going to convince to go back and read this, because I think the trade's coming out this spring, probably.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I'll be getting that too, even though I have all the issues, I'm still getting the damn trade because I love it that much. And it's something I wanted to ask you about this, but we'll get into that in just a second. That's the whole point of this, isn't it? To ask you questions. So were you able to change anything about what happened in the book? A certain character dies, a very important character dies, and I'm not going to say who it is, but they die. And was that your idea? Was that a Marvel doing?
It was my idea. They totally allowed me to do things that would normally not happen in the Marvel series, because this is sort of its own sort of self-contained thing where the stakes have to be life and death for these characters, or the stories don't seem real.
Right.
And so I wanted to tell a story and notify people early on that anything can happen. This is not a story where everything turns out all right by the beginning of the next issue, that there are prices to be paid for the choices they make.
Well, and plus the consequences that they end up having to pay are very real worldy for a group of people who are bombarded by cosmic rays. You don't have Ben reacting the way he does in the normal linear storyline going on now. You have him reacting like somebody who this actually happened to would react, and everything that happened between Reed and Sue. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm not going to say more, but yeah.
And I think that this is what I wanted to bring to it, is this idea that this is actually a life story, that these aren't current characters who realize that everything's going to be all right, and that they're going to be, the world's been invaded by aliens for the 15th time this month, but they'll prevail, and everything will be okay. No, this is a story about people who realize that an alien invasion is coming, and they're probably going to lose, and with it, everyone they've ever loved or cared about, and they take it seriously.
And the thing I love the most about it is it's just like it's hard. How do I put this? That it almost feels like you've written the Disney Plus series for them.
Well, I would love it if they turned this into a Disney Plus series.
Has there been any talk about that? Because I mean, they need to bring the Fantastic Four in.
But I would love it if they did, because they've done such a good job with WandaVision and Loki, that I would love it for it to get that kind of treatment.
I mean, it would. It almost seems like you're the one that has to write the Fantastic Four's foray into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm just going to say it.
Well,
I'm putting it out there.
From your lips to God's ears, I would totally love that.
Well, I mean, we all know, though, according to you, God is disappointed in us.
Yeah, but he'll be a little less so if you make my Fantastic Four life story into a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie.
Perfect.
Or TV show.
Now, what was it about growing up? Like, have you always been in the Fantastic Four? Was it like when you were young that you kind of picked up on it and were just like, wow, this is amazing? Or was it something?
I was never super into Fantastic Four. Like, I was never a super fan. But when I was a kid, I remember, my exposure to comic books was whatever was at the grocery store spinner rack. Mm-hmm. And the Fantastic Four was the one I was always drawn to. And I didn't read monthly. I wasn't like a completist, junkie of Fantastic Four. But it was the one I was always drawn to, and I think what drew me to it was Ben Grimm. The idea there's this man made completely of rocks on the cover, I just found like really, sort of fascinating. And the fact that he actually spoke and talked like a regular guy. He didn't talk like it's superheroes speak, where he sounds like a Victorian, novelist or something. He talks like a guy who would be working at a gas station or something. So he always kind of fascinated me. Like, well, what's that guy's story? It's like just some guy knocking off from like the tire store one day, and then he gets turned into rocks.
And now he looks like a really hard Michelin man. Yeah.
So I think that's what sort of drew me into them. But I also really liked the fact that it has a more of a science fiction angle than other Marvel titles. I was always way more into science fiction than I was into superheroes. So the comics that dealt with science fiction themes always kind of appealed to me more than just sort of the regular superhero guys getting punched out, thrown through plate glass window type comic books.
It does get old sometimes. You can understand why they have to reboot them all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, and this is no knock on people who enjoy that, but because I like those too, but I feel like in a lot of ways it's sort of professional wrestling, whereas more science fiction oriented comics like the Fantastic Four are kind of more like Star Trek. They're like envisioning worlds that don't exist but could if we were worthy of them.
Right. I mean, do you know if Marvel has any plans to do more life story type stuff? And will you be helming the entire life story universe like you should?
No, I definitely could say no to the latter, but I don't know about the former. They very well, I imagine they probably are doing more life story stuff. I don't know if they'll ever ask me to write another one. I'd be up for writing more, but I think the idea behind this, part of the idea of doing a life story, is to get different takes on characters. So they'll probably have different writers, different, aesthetic visions on the different life stories, which is what it should be.
Right. No, I hear you. I understand. But I don't know what it is about life story that just like, I think maybe because Doom was planning something super dastardly in issue 5. Like, we've never seen him plan something like that before.
Doom, well, it's funny you should say that, because probably the most gratifying moment working on the series was when I got an email from Mark Waid saying, damn, I wish I'd thought of that. Which, it's like, I feel like I should print that email and have it like framed on my wall.
I would.
But yeah, I feel like the big difference between Doom and Reed Richards, even though they both discovered the threat of Galactus and they were both devoted their lives to sort of forestalling it and saving the Earth, is that Doom was willing to do whatever it took, even if it meant making the Earth a planet not worth saving.
Yeah, that's Oh man, that's just And then you look out your window now and you're almost like, is
Right.
Doom really running things?
Yeah. Doom is a guy for whom there is no bottom. He will do whatever it takes to get his way. And that is kind of like what I think I just sort of built his character around, that idea that there is no ethical barrier at all to his desire.
Right,
That
right.
it's really just all about a will to power.
Now, two-part question. First part is like, how easily did this story come to you once they approached you with it? Did it just like, yep, this is what I'm boom, and it just kind of came flowing out, or did you have to like struggle with any of the aspects of the story?
Oh yeah, I startled with all the story, but they came to me just with basically the idea of writing a Fantastic Four life story, and I loved what Chip did with the Spider-Man life story.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought this is the way I'm going to structure it. I loved what he did with his pacing. So I kind of try to pace it the same way, where each issue exists complete unto itself, but is also part of a bigger story arc. And it's kind of built around what was going on in the world at the time. So the 60s is very much about the space race, and the 70s is built around like the social movements like ERA and civil rights movements. And the 80s is built around like sort of the day after nuclear paranoia and Reaganism.
Right.
And the 90s is more about like the dawn of the computer age, and our sort of like post Cold War thaw and hipsterism and so on. And so yeah, I really tried to like build the stories that I wrote around it, like what was going on in the world at that time. And also what I wanted to do to keep it from feeling monotonous, keep it to underscore the fact that this is a team, is I gave everyone a different decade to narrate the issue. So
Right.
like in the 60s, Reed's the narrator, and we see the decade through his eyes. In the 70s, Sue is the narrator, and we see the decade through her eyes. In the 80s, it's Johnny. In the 90s, it's Ben. But I really wanted it to be about like life is largely a question of how we see it. It's a question of the parallax through which we perceive the world. And I wanted to like give you a view of the Fantastic Four through each of their different viewpoints.
Right. Now, there seems to be, even though throughout the entire book, I know you touched on a lot of what was going on in the world during that decade, but there seems to also be an underlying in the story of everything that's going on now at the same time. How much did you draw from what we're currently going through?
I don't
know.
If
I asked you that question before when you were on for Snagglepuss, and I have a feeling I'm about to get the same answer.
Maybe I don't remember what I said then, so it could be the same. But I didn't think too much about what was going on now. I think that what is going on now just sort of subconsciously leaks into everything I'm writing,
right?
Because it's what is sort of it's the storm cloud that's floating in my subconscious at all times. Mm-hmm. So in writing it, I could definitely see some parallels to what's happening now, but it's not what I was actively consciously thinking about when I was writing it.
Well, I think it's in everybody's head, and I think a lot of writers are probably like, I couldn't come up with what's going on now.
It's impossible to get away from. So
right.
It's impossible to say, oh, no, this has nothing to do with what's going on now, because it's so much part of the zeitgeist and part of my own subconscious. But it wasn't what I was trying to write about.
Right, exactly. Now, okay, so this is my, this is just a throwaway question, but real quick, you mentioned everybody was narrating a decade. Can you tell us who narrates the tens?
I don't want to, because it's kind of a spoiler.
Okay, no problem. All right, no, I'm not about spoiling this book at all. I want everyone to go pick it up, go to your nerdery and grab it. It's fantastic. It is just so good. What else do you have that you're working on right now?
Well, the big thing right now is I'm doing a 6-issue series as part of the Batman Urban Legends series for DC.
Okay.
And the first issue of that, which appears in Batman number 11, my story about Batman and Ace, his dog, mm-hmm. Which I'm calling Hounded, which I think is going to be it's collected called Batman Hounded. That dropped yesterday.
Okay.
So I'm
damn it. It was at the comic. I was just at the comic shop. Literally, like I walked in the door and set up for this from my local nerdery.
Good. But yeah, it just dropped yesterday. I'm very proud of it. It's got excellent artwork by Carl Mostert and colors by Trish Mulville, and I am just very proud of it. And I think it's one of the best things I've ever written.
Is there now? You're writing Fantastic Four, and you're also writing a Batman story. Is there any kind of? I know back in the day, it used to be you either write for this one or this one. Is there any kind of like do you get any kind of flack from either one? You don't have to say who gives you flack, but
no one gives me flack.
No,
I think in fact it makes you more attractive as a writer if you're doing both, because they realize that this is a guy who's wanted elsewhere. Right. And I'm not that I'm terribly wanted anywhere, but it does sort of improve your cachet if you're not just a DC guy or just a Marvel guy, but you can sort of exist in both universes. And I think that's what most writers do. Most writers are freelance and they go back and forth. We're all double agents, triple agents actually, because really we all do a lot of creator-owned stuff. I'm doing a lot of stuff with Ahoy, whom I love. I love working with Ahoy. I'm doing Second Coming and another series of Billionaire Island, and a series called My Bad, which has been probably the most fun I've ever had working on a series. My buddy Bryce Ingman, he's co-writing it with me. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways to approach comics and a lot of different companies to work for now, which is one of the things I think is the most exciting thing about the industry right now is how many independents and smaller publishers are making really good comics and are in the game. Publishers like Ahoy and Vault and AWA are really doing sort of quality work. That's another company I'm doing Not All Robots with AWA, and the final issue of that story just came out last week. So I like the fact that there's all these different avenues through which to tell your stories now.
Oh yeah, no, that's great. And I my wallet doesn't love it, but I love it. But now you mentioned co-writing a book. Now I've co-written with a couple of people before, and I always found it super tedious because you'll write something and then they'll want to change almost everything you've done. What is your kind of way of co-writing with someone where it doesn't drive you completely insane?
Well, I think the way you mentioned it is kind of the wrong way to do it. That is the way that would drive me completely insane. The way I've done it with Bryce is that like I write one half the story and he writes the other half, because the issue is split between stories dealing with from the perspectives of two different characters. One's a hero, one's a villain. It's about them eventually coming into a collision with each other. And so I'm writing the story about the hero who's like the vigilante hero, who's the heir to a lamp fortune, and his name is the Chandelier. And Bryce is handling the story of his arch nemesis, the villain Emperor King. So it's really refreshing because I only have to carry 10 pages of a comic book, and I get to put in there basically whatever I want to. Ideas that like the big two would just rejected out of hand can go into this comic, and I only have to like carry half the load because Bryce is very capably written the other half, about this other character. Plus, I just like the way that the story is told, like where it's half from one character's perspective and then half from like his nemesis perspective.
Right. Is it like, so what's going to happen when the two collide? How are you guys going to work that?
Well, that one was a little harder to work together, but what we did was we just sort of divided the page numbers. So like we just each still wrote half the issue, but it wasn't, like here's a story about my character and there's a story about his character. It's more like here's a story, but I wrote half the pages and Bryce wrote half the pages.
Okay, so like you wrote. Let's just say, for example, you wrote the first half, and then his half was the reaction to what you wrote in the first half, essentially. In
the last issue, it jumps around. Like for example, I would write pages 2 and 3, and then 7 and 8, or 13 through 15. It was just the pages that were more from my character, where my character was front and center. I wrote those, and the pages where his character was more like the front and center protagonist, he wrote those pages. But yeah, it was really sort of a hard division of labor to come up with because we wanted to like it to be equally both our voices. But I like the fact that that some pages sound very different than others, because this is what life is like. Life is like people with very different perspectives having to sort of coexist or collide with each other.
Right, exactly, and that's exactly. You just stop summing things up. Jeez, you just now when you mentioned before that you were more drawn to sci-fi, but now you're doing this Batman story. What were some of the different challenges in writing the Batman story as opposed to Fantastic Four? I mean, they're both superheroes, but obviously you said one's more sci-fi than the other.
Right. Yeah, the Batman story is not sci-fi science fiction at all. What it really is really, I think, especially for within the context of a superhero story, it's more of a love story about Batman and his dog and the strong connection they have to each other, and about how it's not like Batman saving Ace or Ace saving Batman, but about the loyalty they feel to each other that saves them both. And it's really about the strength of relationships.
See, people need to read your stuff and just look at it like on a deeper level. Don't just look at it from just like, oh, okay, this is what this is. No, you gotta look into it. You gotta.
The thing I hate, and whether they're reading me or someone else, because I know how much effort most writers put into their comic book stories.
Right.
The thing I hate is when somebody just sort of flips through a comic book to sort of grasp what's going on plot wise, who doesn't actually sit there and read it like they would a novel.
Right.
And most writers write to be read. They write for you to actually like sort of savor the lines, or to like pace yourself in your mind the way that they wrote it out, and not just to flip through to, you know, fill your knowledge of what happens in continuity. And it drives me crazy when I feel like somebody's doing that. So take your time, read the story, absorb what, you know, the nuances of what's happening with the characters in their interior lives, and you'll have a much fuller appreciation of it, I think.
Well, not only that, but if you just skim through the books, one of my favorite parts of issue 5 of Life Story is when. Is it a spoiler to say who's narrating issue 5?
No, go ahead. It's been out for a while.
Oh yeah, by this point it's been out for about almost a month. So Franklin is narrating it, and he says, "My dad always used to tell me that the stars are up." I'm paraphrasing. I might get it wrong. He used to tell me that the stars are up there, so we always have to look up once in a while.
That's probably better than what I put. But yeah, it was basically that the sky exists so that we have to look up once in a while.
Yeah, and that's just like it's so like touching. And if you're just skimming through a book, you're going to miss that kind of thing. You know, there are a handful of writers now that I will actively look out for their stuff. There's you, there's Matt Fraction, and Tom King.
Well, I'm happy to be in that company.
That's pretty much it. That's pretty much it.
But yeah, I spend a lot of my attention, if not most of it, like actually like working on these lines to get them. So they communicate directly something from the deepest part of me to to you as the reader. And when people just sort of like flip to look at the art and see what happens in the plot wise without actually like reading the lines, it's like, why did I even bother?
Right.
Why did I waste my time? And when, there's certain reviews, I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus, but there's certain reviews I could tell where they didn't actually read the comic. They just sort of flip through to get the gist of the plot. And it's like, you missed the entire point. You missed the gravity of the entire thing. It's like flying over the ocean and saying, well, there's a bunch of water.
I've never flown over the ocean because I'm not a big fan of being in a death tube.
Yeah. It's like going into space for the first time in your life and saying, well, it's dark out here.
Oh, look, I can float.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get it. I totally get it. Yeah. I mean, and when you first start reading comics, like that first issue, there's something about it that just grabs you and holds you in. Because when you're reading comics, I think if your first issue doesn't grab you, you might as well just not even bother.
I agree. I think that, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with a comic book that doesn't grab you. It's like, be okay with the fact that not everything was written for everybody, and that, don't waste your time on something that's not for you. Find the things that are out there for you, and don't be upset that, I've never understood this. People who like, it's like who hate a title but never miss an issue. It's okay. It's like like going to Big Mac and complaining, or going to McDonald's and complaining that you hate Big Macs and you hate all like 1,000 you've ever eaten. It's like, well, why do you keep eating Big Macs?
I can't believe those kind of people exist. That's crazy.
They only exist in comics, apparently. But there are people who will, hate what you do but never miss an issue. Not many of them, because it's a horrible waste of time.
Right.
But but yeah, I see them sometimes. I was like, what are you doing? It's like, I understand somebody hating, my work or hating a character, but why then continue to read it? Why not
That
move
doesn't
on to
make any
something you
sense.
enjoy? Life is too short.
Yeah, exactly. Like I remember my first issue was the beginning of the Muir Island saga with the X-Men before they merged the teams and with X Factor. And I was just the cover alone, strong guy and Rogue about to throw down. I was like, what the hell? But then I picked up an issue of Deathlock the next week, and I was just like, I don't care about this. So I went back to the X books,
No, I read a lot of comics, as you would imagine, being in the industry. And yeah, there's a lot of them that I just stopped reading after one issue. And it's nothing wrong with the comic. It's just that this does not meet me. It doesn't resonate with me. It will probably resonate brilliantly with another reader. And I just sort of accept that as being an adult. Like, not everything's made for me. Right. And I just move on to something that is.
So you said that you read a lot. What's currently, do you have a poll somewhere? And if so, what's in it?
Oh, yeah. Probably my favorite thing on the stands right now. This is somebody who doesn't really need my help, but I love this comic anyway. Is Tom King's Supergirl series. I just love the way he writes it. He does this sort of like a True Grit style narration to it. And it's just fantastic. It's the one I look forward to most every month. I also recently discovered Stray Dogs, which I thought was just fantastic. And I've been, reading, rereading the Sandman issues, because it's my favorite comic of all time.
And with the show coming out too, it's
but there's so much out there right now that is, I think this is almost, you could say this is a golden age of comics.
Yeah, I mean, I agree.
Made in Korea, Jeremy Holt's series, another one I really love. That I look forward to. And Ice Cream Man, whenever a new Ice Cream Man.
I love that book so much. Yeah. I remember reading it at first. I'm like, this is like the Twilight Zone, but on crack. And I love it.
And W. Maxwell Prince's series about different varieties of clowns is just as good. So I recommend that too.
A buddy of mine just actually won the first issue graded at a 9.8. So I'm like, okay, maybe you might want to read the book. Maybe whatever.
Yeah. I understand the readers much more than I understand the collectors. Yeah. Not that there's anything wrong with collecting, but it's just not what I do. I think culture is there to be consumed.
See, and when you mentioned Supergirl, I love the way he writes it. I do. I have to struggle with the book though, because I'm not a big fan of the art.
Oh, really? Oh my God, I love the art. And again, this is like, not to invalidate your opinion, because it's just different matter of subjective taste. But I love the aesthetic of it.
Yeah, see, and that's a lot of people at the shop I go to kind of agree with me, where none of us are really big fans of. I can't believe I'm about to say this out loud. John Romita Jr., especially his later stuff. And I'm not asking you to make your opinion known. No. But it's we just aren't a big fan, because it's like maybe over time things have changed, but he may have done a great Spider-Man back in the day, but now when we see him do a Superman, it's just like
I love John's art, and but this is I think why it's such a golden age for comics right now, because it's okay that we don't all enjoy the same things. There's enough out there for everyone.
Like what you like, just don't be a dick.
Yeah, like what you like, leave what you don't like for someone else to pick up. Exactly. It's like when I go to the store, I'll buy one can of spaghetti sauce. I'm not going to try to gather up all the other cans of spaghetti sauce that I'm not buying, all the different chunky varieties, and discourage people from buying them. Tell them that's shit. You shouldn't buy that. It's like, no, just pick the one you like, and be glad that other people have access to the ones they like.
Exactly. See, there you go, people. More people need to hear that. So everybody listen to this show so you can hear this man's wise, sage, Yoda-like advice when it comes to
And I think, as writers and artists, it's like, don't worry about the people who don't like your art. It's like, if everybody likes it, it's probably pretty mediocre. You make things for the people who actually like your stuff.
Right.
And don't worry about the people who don't.
Exactly. I want to thank you so much for being back on. We're definitely going to have you back on
Anytime.
as things go through. Man Russ on Twitter. I think last time I fucked
like a
it
man
up.
walrus.
Yes, I fucked it up last time, but I'm not going to fuck it up this time. Fantastic Four Life Story number 6. The big conclusion comes out, I think, February 2nd. Am I right?
That sounds right.
Okay.
I don't know.
Early February. We'll just go with early February. If you're listening to this later, it's already on news. It's already at your local comic book shop. Go get all the issues. You will not be sorry by any stretch of the imagination. Mark Russell, thank you so much for being on.
Well, thank you. I'm not going to argue with any of them.
This is the Ron Purtee Show.
All right, everybody, that was a fun episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Don't forget to head over to UncleRon'sDrive-In.com. That's the hub for everything. Patreon.com/I'm Uncle Ron. You can get all of the episodes as early as I can put them out. You know, they're not. I can't magically make them go super early, but this one got released early. Next week's with Annalise Curtin's getting released early. So the only way to do that is to head over to Patreon.com/I'm Uncle Ron. And it's as little as $1 for $1 a month. I'm cheap and sometimes easy, depending on the person. Don't forget also to follow me on social media at I'm Uncle Ron on Twitter and Instagram. And I wanted to announce something real quick before we go. I am giving away copies of the new Bruce Willis film, Apex. But we will get into that next week. But just keep that in mind. If you want a copy on Blu-ray and on DVD, I am not discriminating. Oh, there you go. I am not discriminating against people who have yet to upgrade their systems. So, but yeah, next week we're going to be talking about that. And we'll have any kind of updates about anything. And Annalise Curtin will be joining us. I want to thank you all for listening. You're amazing.